Oh, how nice to get to be with you in this special time. So I want.
She published her final video message on April 24, 2026.
When are you going to retire? I am retired. Retiring is doing what you
One
like.
day before she died. And when you read the title, knowing what happened the following morning, something shifts.
On them. But I think the processes of God, if we can embrace.
Something tightens in the chest, because the title was not a coincidence. It was not a randomly scheduled piece of content. It was, whether she knew it or not, the most perfectly chosen final word a woman of faith could have possibly left behind. The title was Grace Builds Faith. Marilyn Hickey passed away on Saturday, April 25, 2026. She was 94 years old. She had spent more than 6 decades covering the earth with the Word of God, her ministry's own description of her life's work. She had preached in over 100 countries. She had stood before crowds of hundreds of thousands. She had prayed for miracles in Pakistan and Egypt and Ethiopia and Panama and China. And on the last full day of her life, she published one final teaching. Grace Builds Faith. In this classic teaching, Marilyn shows how faith activates what Christ paid for. Let's talk about what that actually means, because the hidden message inside those words goes far deeper than a simple theological headline. Grace, in the tradition Marilyn Hickey taught from for over 60 years, is not something you earn. It is not something you work toward. It is not the reward at the end of a long enough prayer list or a serious enough life. Grace, in her understanding, is what was already secured before you needed it, before you knew you needed it, before you could even articulate what victory or healing or provision meant for your specific life. God's grace has already secured your victory, healing, and provision. Already, that word is doing everything in that sentence. Not will secure, already secured, past tense, done, before you woke up this morning, before you were diagnosed, before the loss came, before the body started slowing down, before the 94th year arrived and the breath became shallower and the world outside the window got a little quieter. Already secured. And faith, Marilyn always taught, is not the force that makes God act. It is the mechanism by which you receive what God has already done. You don't believe hard enough to earn the miracle. You believe because the miracle is already yours. Faith activates what Christ paid for, not creates, activates. That is the theology she built her entire ministry on. And she was still teaching it precisely, clearly, without apology, on the last day she had on this earth. But here is the hidden meaning that nobody who scheduled that teaching knew they were delivering. Marilyn Hickey was 94 years old. Her husband Wallace had died 14 years earlier. She had watched the man she traveled the world with disappear slowly from Alzheimer's before leaving altogether. She had kept going, because the mission did not pause for grief. She had faith that grace had already secured what was on the other side of that loss for him, and for her, and for the ministry that still needed her. And now, in the final season of her own life, she was preparing to find out whether everything she had taught for 60 years was true, not as an intellectual exercise, as a personal reality. Grace Builds Faith was not just a theological position. It was her testimony. It was the operating system of her entire life. The thing she fell back on every time the crusade doors seemed closed, every time 19 years of prayer for Ethiopia felt like silence, every time the body refused to cooperate with the schedule the mission required. Grace was already there. She just had to keep activating it, keep believing, keep going. And then on April 25, 2026, she stopped going. Not because the grace ran out, but because it had fully arrived. One tribute called her anointed echo, one that will resound for generations here on earth. Another said she didn't just teach the Bible, she lived it. Another said she paved the way for us. Another said, stay faithful, keep going, and never let go of what God has called you to do. All of them are describing the same woman, the one who published Grace Builds Faith on April 24, who went home on April 25, who spent 94 years telling the world that what God secures does not expire. That was the hidden meaning in her final video. Not a warning, not a goodbye, not even a summary. A statement of faith, made by a woman who was one day away from discovering with complete certainty that she had been right all along. Rest well, Marilyn Hickey. July 1, 1931, April 25, 2026. Grace builds faith, and she proved it. Thank you for watching.